The National Defense Strategy is a document that is central to understanding what the priorities are for the defense of the United States. It outlines the threats that the United States faces. It also outlines where the Defense Department will invest its time, resources, and funding, and what other initiatives will be needed to keep us safe. Because this document will be referred to a number of times down the road on this channel, in this episode of Learning Military, I thought it would be appropriate to talk about some of the most important aspects of this vital document. The National Defense Strategy states that to accomplish its objectives, we must make difficult choices. These choices are going to require input and will impact all of us, military or civilian. This gives you another reason to know what is in this document. So if you're interested in reading a summary of the National Defense Strategy, I'll provide a link in the description below. But before we begin, I just want to remind everybody, if you want to help support me and help this channel to grow, Patreon is the best way to do it. You'll find a link to that in the description below. In addition, if you can't subscribe, hit that bell icon so you can be notified when future episodes of Learning Military come out. It'd be greatly appreciated. And of course, if you know somebody who would enjoy this episode, please feel free to share this with them. The National Defense Strategy is a document that is set to be created and released every 4 years by the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Since the National Defense Strategy has classified elements to it, a summary of the document is released to the general public that is unclassified. The last time that the National Defense Strategy, or the NDS, was published was 2018 under then Secretary James Mattis. While there has been some change in personnel, even at the highest levels of the Office of the Secretary of Defense and elsewhere, the strategy remains relevant. This is evidenced by the influencing of a similar document called the National Military Strategy, which is released by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The 2018 NDS was particularly revolutionary as it outlined a major shift in the priorities for the United States. Secretary Mattis was very clear in the document when he said that our military advantage was eroding and that the focus of the United States would now be focused primarily on preparing for and engaging in interstate strategic competition or great power competition between powerful nations. This was a major shift from the previous focuses being primarily rogue or failed states, terrorism, insurgencies, and other such foes. General Mattis is very clear and open about the ramifications of maintaining the status quo. In a few quotes from the introduction, he states quite clearly that America's military has no preordained right to victory on the battlefield, and that to meet the challenges that we now face, he says, we must make difficult choices and prioritize what is most important to field a lethal, resilient, and rapidly adapting joint force. He further goes on to say that failure to meet our defense objectives will result in decreasing U.S. global influence, eroding cohesion among allies and partners, and reducing access to markets that will contribute to a decline in our prosperity and standard of living. This honest assessment of the strategic environment is critical to knowing what is on the line, and it leads very well into defining the major challengers to the U.S. military advantage. In the NDS, the challengers to the United States national security are always listed in the same order. Those challengers are China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and finally non-state actors like terrorist organizations. While I don't have anything to support this, I think that this order matters, and I don't know if it's because that they're being listed in the greatest threat to the U.S. national security or the priority that the United States is going to focus on countering. But anyway, I just thought it was an interesting note that they were always listed in the same order throughout this entire document. In the National Defense Strategy, China and Russia are defined as revisionist powers, meaning that they seek to change the free, open, and rule-based world order that was created following World War II. They each seek to spread their authoritarian rule by being able to influence other countries' economic, diplomatic, and security decisions in their respective spheres for their own gain. One important note from the NDS specifically relates to China, and it says that the most far-reaching objective of this defense strategy is to set the military relations between our two countries on a path of transparency and non-aggression. Now, the next category in the NDS comprises of the challengers North Korea and Iran, and they're classified as rogue regimes. What sets these countries apart is their open support for state-sponsored terrorism and their reliance on chemical, nuclear, biological, and other dangerous weapons to either try and maintain their own regime or to be able to coerce or influence their neighbors, many of which are U.S. allies. They'll also try to do the same with the United States, again though to their own benefit. The last category defined in the National Defense Strategy is non-state actors, and this category is where terrorism, insurgents, and others are included, but the scope has seemed to increase further than that to include transnational criminal organizations and also cyber hackers. These groups have seen an increase in the amount of disruption that they can cause to the United States and have become a larger focus due to more recent activity in gray zone warfare. With all of this in mind, the first priority of the Department of Defense is to defend the homeland from attack, but we must be ready to meet any of these challenges, which are set across three very different areas of the world: the Indo-Pacific, the Middle East, and Europe. During peacetime, the NDS states that it will be focused on deterrence by being prepared for war. However, in wartime, it says, quote, "The fully mobilized joint force will be capable of defeating aggression by a major power, deterring opportunistic aggression elsewhere, and disrupting imminent terrorist and WMD threats," close quote. This is not something that the US is going to be able to do alone. A significant portion of the National Defense Strategy specifically discusses our alliance and partnerships with other countries. It states, quote, "Our allies and partners provide complementary capabilities and forces along with unique perspectives, regional relationships, and information that improve our understanding of the environment and expand our options," close quote. It goes on to mention that our partners can provide access to vital areas and assist with providing bases and logistic needs for the United States. It's also clear in the NDS that these alliances and partnerships have been a critical part of our security in the past, and we must continue to invest in these in the future. The US will seek to expand alliances and partnerships across the world. These will be critical to countering China in the Indo-Pacific, to counter terrorism in Africa and the Middle East as well. In the NDS, NATO is specifically called out as being critical to countering Russia in Europe. Specifically, it says about NATO that fortifying the alliance is going to be required. The NDS states that, quote, "Commitment to Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty is vital to our security," quote. And in turn, it asks that European allies, and it says that we expect our European allies to fulfill their commitments to increase defense and modernization spending to bolster the alliance in the face of our shared security concerns. So in order to meet these objectives laid out in the National Defense Strategy and to be a solid partner with these countries, the National Defense Strategy lays out some key areas of investment that need to be made to return our forces to a status where they would be able to succeed in completing their objectives. These investments will require an increase in funding to primarily modernize these areas, which are, first, the nuclear forces. This includes not only modernizing the delivery systems of the nuclear triad, so submarines, bombers, and ground systems, but it also includes modernizing the command, control, communications, and other important infrastructure surrounding the use of nuclear weapons for both offensive and defensive reasons. Second, investing in space and cyberspace as warfighting domains. And this we have started to see with the creation of the Space Force, but there is more that could be done to increase our advantage in the area of space. For example, the Pentagon has a goal of launching 1 satellite per week. In the realm of cyber, though, the US wants to be able to have a wide array of options to complement or replace a conventional military strike. Third, modernizing the command, control, communications, computers, and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance systems, better known as C4ISR. Now, C4ISR is critical for decision making, and so it is important not only to increase our capabilities in this area, but it's also important to make sure that computer networks and various ecosystems are protected and secure in an environment where it has become more challenging to do so. Fourth, investing in missile defense. Now, ballistic missiles are a centerpiece to the strategy of some of the challengers that we had listed earlier. Whether it be chemical, biological, nuclear, conventional, or other types of ballistic missiles, there are more defensive measures that can be implemented. And with the ever-increasing progress being made in the area of hypersonic weapons, this will be a major priority if those really do come to light. Fifth, joint lethality in contested environments. And this would include anywhere from having the ability to strike deep into enemy territory that has advanced air defense or missile defense systems to close combat lethality in complex terrain like an urban environment. Sixth, forward force maneuver and posture resilience. Now, assets and personnel must be able to deploy, survive, operate, maneuver, and regenerate in all domains while under attack. Some investment here would include moving from large unprotected bases and installations to more smaller yet dispersed areas with better defenses. Seventh, advanced autonomous system. AI is already a big investment with the Department of Defense, and they're looking at undertaking a number of programs with AI that would fall into this category. But there are other things that would be considered as well, such as the further development of UAVs and UGV systems. Eighth, resilient and agile logistics. Now, pre-positioned munitions, supplies, and other logistics need to be ready and protected against a strike by a hostile actor. Investments can be made to ensure that personnel has what they need to fight when they need it. Now, when you think about all the things that we have reviewed so far, this really is a lot that's being asked of the United States Armed Forces. We're talking about 5 challengers over 3 unique geographical areas and a massive modernization plan with the aim of being able to successfully confront one, deter the rest, and still be able to protect the homeland from WMDs and terrorist attacks. Now, fortunately, the NDS does talk about some of the ways that the United States can achieve all of this. First and foremost, it is going to require that there's proper funding to pull this off. The NDS calls for, and both of these are important, sustained and predictable budgets. While more funding is always helpful, a rapid and unexpected increase in funding doesn't allow the Pentagon to really fund programs that will require multiple years to complete. And obviously, a major decrease in funding is not going to do any good either. While this primarily calls upon Congress to provide adequate budgets, there are some aspects of fiscal responsibility that the NDS calls for within the Department of Defense. It entails eliminating duplication of efforts and of organizations within the DoD, to name a few. It is also required that the DoD look at the private sector to help produce some solutions or harness some of the experience that exists outside of the government. There are startups, small companies, universities, scientists, and others who may be able to lend their expertise to the Department of Defense, which will enable the armed forces to have the tools they need without it having to be developed within the government at the same time. The NDS says that such partnerships will be critical to maintaining our technological advantage and to be able to build efficiencies in the future. So as you can see, the 2018 National Defense Strategy gives us a 10,000-foot view of the challenges that the United States faces and what we are going to do about them. This critical document is key in understanding U.S. policy today and can help people understand why key national security decisions are made. Again, I would suggest reading it in detail to get even more insight than what I've been able to share with you in this video, and there's a lot more to study around this too. For example, if there's enough interest, I'll be able to review recommendations and feedback on the National Defense Strategy that was given to the government by a special commission that was formed specifically to review this document. The report is about 116 pages long, so I wouldn't recommend necessarily that you read it, but I've read it once before and I would be happy to do it again if you would find it interesting. Just let me know in the comment section below. That's going to be it for this episode of Learning Military. Thanks for watching.